I'd like to now introduce Mariela, our new CEO. She's got some great insights and background to help us in this. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming back. Really appreciate it. And slight change in topic, but still relevant for everyone here. And you know, it's a hard ask to follow, Sid. So hopefully, well, no, I'm not dancing for anyone. So what I want to concentrate on is sustaining gliding clubs within, I guess, in the current environment, it is a very challenging issue for everyone. So I just want to take a look at some of the themes that are, that I think are important for you guys to look at. And it's about developing a club as a whole, because running a club has many aspects to it. And I know the majority of what we've spoken about yesterday and now this morning has been about the safety aspect, but there is a lot that goes into running a club. And it doesn't matter whether it's gliding or whether it's, a ball sport or anything else. The premise is still the same. Just for a bit of background on me, because some of you may wonder, what do I know? So, from a industry perspective, I've 20 plus years within the sport and recreation industry over a number of different areas. So football being the main one, and when I say football, I mean round ball football, not rugby or AFL, and that's my passion, and still very heavily involved in football at a local level with my club. State level, I worked for Football Victoria, and at a national level, worked for both Football Australia and now the Australian Professional Leagues with the A-League. I did work in volleyball. Some very tall people there. Refused to have stand-up meetings because I pretty much reached their chest most of the time. And also in swimming. I was a swimmer back in the day and did do some work in the aquatics industry as well. And my last stint was in the public service. We'll never go back. At Sport and Recreation Victoria, did 9 years there. From a personal point of view, participating in football, I played for 20 odd years until my body couldn't anymore. There's only so much tape you have in this world to keep yourself together. I currently coach. It means nothing to most of you guys, but I'm an AFC B licence holder, and have been a committee member, have been a president of a club, have been a team manager, and now a soccer mum. So I've run the gamut of volunteerism, and what this industry can offer. So why this topic matters, and it's very near and dear to my heart, is because and I said it before, that gliding is very niche, but still has very similar issues to most other volunteer clubs in this country. And clubs are the backbone of any sport. Without clubs, the sport doesn't run. And it is in Gliding Australia's best interest to make sure that the clubs are healthy and they're running. And so, but the problem that we're having at the moment is that the sustainability of any club, it's under pressure. There's pressures coming in from every which way, and it does make it hard for volunteers across the board. So the current reality is that there is declining volunteer availability, and that was sped up with COVID. Right, it was declining before that at a very slow rate, but COVID just blew that out of the water. And there's increasing compliance and governance issues across the board. We're asking you who may be working full time, or you who have a family, or you have 20 other things to do, to tick 100 different boxes to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And that's a pressure. There's rising costs. A war breaks out, all of a sudden your diesel costs, $3 a litre, and it becomes near on impossible to drive to wherever you need to go. And members are time poor. You know, with COVID, everybody realised that time is precious and they would rather be doing something else than volunteering at a club, so they'll go and do their own thing. So the key challenges for any club is volunteer engagement. How do you engage them? Social connection versus the activity focus. And I'll go into that a bit later because it is important. Your club identity. What is your club? What is it providing its members? And membership capacity constraints. You know, do you have enough assets? Do you have enough people servicing the members that are coming through? Or do you not have enough members at all? And why is that? So the problem with volunteer engagement. So the perception, you need to be at the club all day. You need to be at the club all weekend or week, you know, depending on what you're doing. The reality, again, people have limited time, so that reduces your volunteer pool. So how do we fix that? What you need to remember, and this is really important, is that if your club still relies on the handful of people, you know, the 5 or 10 people that have been doing the same thing for 5 years, then it's not a capacity issue, it's a design issue. Have you designed your volunteer pool and how you use your volunteers in a way that you get the most out of them? Okay, because you have James going to a club, let's say he's president of a club. Why should he be the one that's always opening and closing? Putting out, you know, tables, chairs, you know, whatever it is. Why should he be the one to do it when you've got 20 other people within the club? Is it because he feels that he's the only one that can do it? Or is it because he hasn't asked? Or is it because anybody else is too scared because they go back to the whole, oh, geez, I've got to be here all day? So there is a heavy reliance on volunteers for operations, and that's a given. You're not really going to get past that. And in gliding, your roles are very specialist, some of them. So that's an issue. And I say that's an issue because if you keep hold of that with, you know, really strong fists and you don't want to let it go because you don't think anybody else can do it, then you're not going to get anybody else through. And because of this, the burnout rate can end up being quite high within your club. So I challenge you to rethink your volunteer roles. So your old model, you're there all day or, you know, however long it runs, depending on the activity that you're doing. You rely on just general help. Okay, we're going to get that table over there. It's your turn to come, and then we'll just give you jobs on the day. That's kind of the thinking, right? As long as we've got 5 people, then we should be right. And it's the same people. You then come to, you know, next month, and it's like, we've got something else to do, and, oh, no, they did a good job. Let's just ask them again, right? Because we know they can get it done, and I really can't be bothered asking anybody else or training anybody else. So that's the old way of thinking. And that's how most clubs run. Again, you know, whether it's gliding or whether it's a ball sport or any other club, this is the thought process. So I challenge you to rethink it. Are there any tasks within your club that can be shortened, that can be much more defined? So, for example, if you need somebody to check in your air experience flights, can we just get one person to do that and that's their task for the day and you don't ask anything else of them? And that could be 2 hours, that could be 3 hours, however long it takes. So skill-based roles. If you need a treasurer, have you got an accountant? I know it sounds very, very simplistic, but you'd be surprised how many clubs go, oh, whatever, you know, he's got time, so we'll just give him the books. You know, do you need a marketing person? Somebody with a background. Somebody with a background in admin. You'd be surprised how skilled, the skill it takes for somebody to run the admin of your club. And then this could potentially open up to broader participation to people who may not actually get in a glider but still want to be around your club. So as I said before, some strategies: break down your roles, 1 hour to 3 hours to half a day, whatever that looks like. Because as we all know in this day and age, people's attention span isn't very long. They prefer to, consume things in short bursts. So let's try and cater for that. Introducing remote roles. Somebody can't drive out, but they can still do some of your admin. Why not let them do your admin? That does then rely on clubs putting their stuff on a cloud of some sort, so then they can access it. But that's another conversation. Create event-based volunteering. If you've got a very specific event, a very special event, then maybe you target different people to work those events. And again, recruit based on skills, not on availability, because you'll get the best people and you'll get the best result out of doing it that way. So I'm going to put up a case study. And this is a real life experience case study because it's my football club that I still belong to. I was president of that club, committee member, choose any other activity, and I did it within that club. I've been part of the club for about 20 years. So the old model, let's go pre-COVID, was small committee, and they were responsible for sourcing coaches, running the canteen, managing registrations, putting out cones, putting up the nets. Every single little task that needed to be done, it was the actual committee that did it, and it was a committee of 7, and it was always the same people. The result of that is that we did lose committee members. The turnover for some of them was high because they were there every weekend, they were there during training nights, and training nights ran from Monday to Friday because we're talking about a ball sport here, so we're talking about team sports. And then they were not willing to step back in. We kind of lost them. So within the space of 5 years, the question I asked the committee was, well, what can we outsource? At the time, the biggest bugbear was the canteen. Who wants to put hot chips in an oil fryer? I don't. So that's what it came down to. So we outsourced it, which meant that we didn't have to rely on parents to sit in a small room serving food to people. And we got a local business owner who ran some cafes who kind of wanted to expand his business, and he's been running it for the last 3 years. Took a bit to get there, but, he's running it for the last 3 years. And we let him keep the money for the food. We keep the bar. We make a lot of money out of the bar. So that's the agreement. And it's worked because we're not asking parents to come in and fill in who may not turn up because they're like, can't be bothered today. The other one was the coaching function. So the biggest part of the club was the little ones, so between the ages of 7 through to 11 is what is termed mini-roos within football. And we outsourced that to a local guy who used to play A-League and he was now running an academy, and he came to us and he said, I think I can fix your problem, but you need to pay us X amount of dollars. Now, the amount that we had to pay him was $8,000 for the year. But he provided all the coaches, all the setup, all the training, which meant that 500 kids were being taken care of by the committee. The benefits of outsourcing these sorts of things was that we then could concentrate on the other volunteer positions such as social media, such as the secretary duties and the strategic intent of the club with the volunteers, and we broke those down and we made sure we found people that were skilled in that area. We had a lot of business owners. We had a lot of people that had worked in sport, you know, and a lot of finance people who were able to then help and step in and were willing to, because we broke those positions down. So over the growth, 5+ years, we went from 450 players, and as of today, we're sitting just under 1,000 players, because we were able to then concentrate on how to grow the club, and it wasn't just about the operations and then burning people out. We've got less turnover on the committee because of that. I know this is football, and football is a high participation sport. I get that. But it's still a struggle to run a club when you're still running under the old model of relying on five to seven of the same people year in, year out, and doing your operations as you've always done them. So, what I hope you get out of something like this is that you go back to your clubs, open up your minds a little bit and go, well, how can we do things differently? Because just because you've done it for the same way the last 20 years doesn't mean it's actually working, because the times have changed. Your generations have changed, and how they consume their activity has changed. And I know that's hard for some of, like even for me within football, sometimes I do miss the old days of how things were done. But, I've also got to understand that things are different now. People, there's a whole population that would prefer just to play social football. They don't want to be in a competition. And I get that. So we have to provide for that. So maybe there's a way of getting other people into your club, and maybe you actually need to ask the younger generation what it is they want within that club and how they would like to participate. I had Matilda come up to me yesterday. I know we keep pointing her out, but she's the youngest person in the room. I'm quite impressed that she's still come back. She's asked, how can I help? I can do social media. Bang. It's not a small task in this organisation, but it's a small bit, because social media is part of a bigger plan of communications. But if she can help in that one area, amazing. So maybe you need to ask these guys, what it is they want out of the club. Leads me to the next point of the real reason why people join. It's not just the flying. The flying is the main component, but they also join for social connection. So while some of you fly by yourselves and you like it that way, and that's fine, but you also want to be around like-minded people who know that you want to fly by yourself. So it is that social element at the start of the day or at the end of the day that people look for. To talk about your gliders, to talk about the operations, or to talk about stuff that doesn't even relate to gliding, but people understand. That's what people join for. What clubs often get wrong is there's an over-focus on operations, and so there's no thought process that in relation to the social element of your club, because you actually don't think that's important. You don't think that's why you're there. And then you wonder why people don't want to come to your club. I feel like I'm telling people off, but I'm not. It's just I need people to understand that there's a different way of running your club, and it has to change. So start by building your social club, or the social part of your club. Barbecues, meals, post-flying gatherings. Do you just kind of finish, pack up and then leave? Or can you add something to the end of the day that's worthwhile to somebody? Family-friendly events. I know some people kind of do their sport or, do their activity because they want to get away from their family, but let's change that and go, well, how do you bring them in? How do you bring them into your world and the love of what you have? And non-flying social days. Do you do that? Trivia nights. I know it sounds really simplistic, but do you do them? Do you bring them in to have a bit of fun and a drink and a meal? That's kind of what I'm thinking of. Do you have a social coordinator at your club? Is that something that you've even thought about? Somebody who's, that fun, bubbly, annoying person that will come up to you and go, hey, come come to this event. Do you have that person, who's over-energised? Because if you don't, you might need to find somebody to do that for you. Do you have an annual calendar? Most of you will say yes, but do you actually use it? Do you work it? Do you put stuff in? Or do you just put the stock standard, it's the template every year, this is what we have, and you kind of move the dates because the days of the year change each year. And measure engagement. You guys have got data coming out of your ears, but I bet you none of you measure how engaged people are, and there are ways of doing that. So that's something that you probably need to start thinking about if you want to grow your club. Your club identity. A lot of clubs will turn around and say, yeah, we're a gliding club. Okay, you're a gliding club. But what within your gliding club, what is it that you are? Training only, training focused. Social flying, recreation flying, high performance club, or are you all three? Have you got the ability to be all three? I can guarantee you most of you haven't defined that, because I tell you now, the moment you define that, the path starts to clear up as to what you need to do. I know within my football club, it was always just recreation, but we really didn't have a path. We're like, oh yeah, people come down and have a kick, they'll compete, local leagues, local Geelong League down in Victoria. But then when the numbers started increasing, we had a lot of people go, well, we want a bit more. And so we had to rethink that strategically and go, what does that more mean? So long story short, we now have a section of the club which is just local-based competition. Sunday men, come in for a drink, kick about, pretend they're still good. Then you've got, all the juniors, who just want to play locally. They just want to have fun with their friends. But then you've got the other side of the club, Community Premier League is what they call them. So they go into Melbourne to play, and they play high level, state league men, state league women. So we've now got two paths, but we've defined that. So your club might need to go back and have a serious think about what your club is. If it's a training club, then go and advertise that as you being a training club. You are the place to be. This is what we offer. Because I've had a look at, some websites, some social media. It's not really there. You're not really telling people. You can't tell people, nobody's mind readers. Like, all of you within here know each other like the back of your hand. But what about those on the outside? You don't. They don't. They don't know who you are. They don't know where you're going, what you're doing. So this is something that is really important, I think, to ensure the sustainability of gliding moving forward. Because whilst we joke and say that we've got, a lot of people on the older side here, it's actually, for me, it's concerning when I've got Sophie, James and Matilda, the only three that I know are kind of younger, who, sorry, you got struck twice today. But yeah, it's kind of concerning because the majority of the room are on the older side. So where are the younger ones, and how is the club embracing them? And then I'm going to throw something else out here. How are the club embracing the women? Because that's the other part of it. They can't be excluded. They know how to do stuff too. And I'm not, I think the mindset needs to shift a little bit when it comes to what traditional gliding look like. Oh, the other part that I do want to highlight is the clubs need to showcase not just your gliders. You got to showcase the experience within them. Okay? What it feels like to be up there. What it feels like to beat your time if you're racing. What it feels like to take somebody new up into the air. Those sorts of experience you need to put out there. So membership capacity, the reality. So growth without planning creates a lot of pressure. So you're trying to grow your club, you need to have a plan. Without, it's if you end up with 5 more people at your club, what does that realistically look like for your current volunteer base? Are you stretching your assets? Yeah, and if you can't service those members are going to, especially if they're new, they're going to walk away and go, this is rubbish. We're going to go somewhere else or do something else entirely. So, and capacity is limited by resources. So how are you using your resources? Is there another way of using them where you can maximise opportunity? Because again, it goes to that whole, if you've done it the same way the last 20 years, then, why change it? Well, you probably need to if you want more people coming through those doors. So membership capacity can be your weakest link because you fail to retain members if you're not actually planning for them. So some of these strategies, and these things you probably already know and you're like, oh, yeah, okay. But it probably stands to reason that, need to actually reiterate, train more instructors, what does that look like? And what can Gliding Australia do for you on that? And what I challenge you guys is, come and have a chat to us about it. Don't just throw out their problems and go, well, this is crap, got to do something about it. Oh, okay, yeah, we know. But what is it that we can do to help? Improve your scheduling systems or improve your systems just in general. You're still all paper-based. Do we need to move to a cloud system? Do we need to make it digitised so then your younger generation can then walk in and go, oh, these guys know what they're doing? Introduce a tiered membership base within your club, or is it just one member category? Have you included those that may not want to fly but want to be around and want to be part of your club? And here's one, partner with other clubs. It's not an us versus them. You have that mentality, you're never going to be joined as one. Yeah, you may have a gripe with somebody down the road, and that could be historical. Trust me, I've seen it across all sports. But you guys are a small movement, and you can't afford to have those gripes. So how do you help the club down the road? A president's picking up the phone, going, hey, how are you doing this? Share your knowledge. It's not rocket science. It's you just trying to prop each other up. So for the future, what you hopefully take out of this, and you can take whatever you want out of this, is try and make it flexible for volunteers. Bite-size roles, specific roles. Outsource stuff if you can. You may not be able to, and that's fine. But then how do you work within what you've got? Have a social mindset. Be friendly with others. Have an event on. You can start with once a year, and that can be your flagship event that people come to. Clarify who you guys are as a club, what you actually do. It goes to that whole saying, jack of all trades, master of none. Do you need to maybe move off some of your activities to concentrate on one that you think you can do? And plan for growth. if 10 extra members is going to break you, why is that? But if it's not, how do you service those members? And I'll leave you with this. Clubs that adapt and change their mindset will survive. Clubs that don't and stay back 20 years ago, I've seen it before, you'll die off as a club and you cease to exist. You become something of history. Now I've brought the room down. Has anybody got any questions? And it doesn't have to be now. You can ask me any questions at any time. That's fine.